Hi, welcome to this video about the LEIBNIZ binary subsystem by Xaoc Devices. In this video I will show you less about how the modules operate. I will show you a little bit more how to connect them, and by that I mean how to connect the LEIBNIZ headers on the back with these 10-pin cables. Because I know when I first got these three modules it was really overwhelming. Not only can you chain them in different ways, but you also need to get the orientation of the cables correct. I'll also show you how to connect this patchbay that a really nice guy from France sent me. This patchbay brings the LEIBNIZ connectors to the front of your case, and this makes it possible to change the order of your LEIBNIZ chain without having to unscrew your modules. But it needs to be said that these LEIBNIZ connectors need to be handled with care. I'm not only making this video because I was very confused the first time I was faced with connecting these modules, but I've been also getting a lot of questions about what the order of my chain is. And to every person that asked me about this, my answer was always, I will make a video about this. So if you're one of those people and you're watching this video right now, this one is for you. And again, many thanks to all of you for the support on this series. And a very big thank you to Lucas and everyone at Xaoc Devices for supporting my work on this series as well. Let's get started. So if you're just connecting DREZNO to your system, there's not much to it. But if you want to be able to route the ADC input side of DREZNO to the DAC output side with the link knob, and normally when you purchase a new module, the cable here is connected, but if it's not, you need to use a 5-pin ribbon cable to connect the LEIBNIZ out bus on the back here to the LEIBNIZ in bus. Take care to get the orientation of the cable right. On DREZNO there's a little white circle next to the connectors on the PCB indicating where the red stripe on your cable needs to go. Now I have one of these types of cables where the red stripe is not really that well visible, but it is there. So it's here on the left, and it's just like when you connect the power cable to your bus boards. You need to align this red cable to the mark on the PCB. So be careful when to connect these LEIBNIZ data ports that you always align them correctly. So on the in bus, the little circle is to the left here. So let's connect this cable like this. I always double check my connections. I already connected the power cable to the connector on the flying bus cable of the tip-top Yuzus. And now let's change up the camera angle and let's just briefly have a look what we can do with just a DREZNO. So everything is connected. I've screwed in DREZNO using the famous 2-bolt technique. And now for this quick look into what we can do with DREZNO, I'm using this frequency central wave runner LFO, which we can see as the top trace on a gyroscope. I will run this through DREZNO, and right now the output side of DREZNO is not linked. So, as you probably remember from the first video about DREZNO, if I now connect this output, none of the incoming signal is routed through. And if I wouldn't have connected the LEIBNIZ bus on the back, pressing the link button wouldn't change anything, but because I have connected the LEIBNIZ bus, the information is now routed through. And of course, with the sliders, I can adjust both the offset of the incoming and the outgoing signals. So this is the sound we will be working with. And I will connect the output of DREZNO to the modulation for the timbre, which is essentially just like turning this knob. Let's slow it down. Now to change this signal, we can switch out bits by manually connecting these jacks on the left here to the jacks on the right. And you can hear and see on the scope that this changes the signal coming from the DAC output. And because WaveRunner also sends out a clock every time the cycle of its LFO restarts, we can use this clock as well to patch into these bit inputs. Let's remove this one for a moment. So now it's just the clock coming from WaveRunner that's mangling the output of DREZNO. And because these jacks on the left produce gates, we can of course also use these to modulate other parameters. Let's use one of these gates to adjust the color. Let's use one of the higher bits. And let's use another one of the gates to modulate my distortion. And you can see even in a really simple system with a few modules, basic LFO, rates, and an overdrive distortion with some CV inputs, that just by adding DREZNO you get a lot of modulation options. Now, once you start adding modules to the LEIBNIZ system, it gets, of course, exceedingly confusing. But while there's exponentially more connections to be made, of course, it's still just as important that you get all the orientations of all the cables exactly right. So first of all, let me remove the power cables for demonstration purposes. So first off, I want to make a chain with DREZNO first, then Lipsk, then Jena, and then the information from Jena will be sent back to the DAC side of DREZNO. To get this to work, we of course need to connect the LEIBNIZ data cables. And on DREZNO, there's little dots that indicate the orientation for the cables. On Lipsk, there's these dots as well for the 5-pin LEIBNIZ connectors that are located at the bottom here. Don't get these confused with the power connector. And then on Jena, at least on this version of the PCB, I'm not sure if this is the case on every PCB version. There's no dots, but there's a little white arrows indicating the correct orientation for the cables. So let me adjust my camera angle so I can show you a little bit better how I connect these. So if you can, I would suggest you first connect your power cables. Of course, turn off your system. This will make it a lot easier to get the modules into your system. Afterwards, I would also suggest doing it upside down, not like I'm doing it here. So if you want to install your modules in this orientation, you lay them in front of your case, at least with a skiff. This would be the easiest way to do, maybe on a towel or something. Connect the power cables, then connect the LEIBNIZ data cables, and then screw them into your system, because from the moment that the data cables are connected, these should be handled as one unit, and it can be a little bit cumbersome to pick them up. But let me just show you in this orientation so you can just read what's on these panels. So I want to be able to connect something to the input of DREZNO, and I want to be able to send this to Lipsk for bit inversion. And really the headers on the back of the LEIBNIZ modules leave us not a lot of choices. There's really only one option, and that is to connect the outputs to the inputs or vice versa. You just need to be really careful that you connect them in the right orientation. So here the dot is on the left. So this cable has the red stripe on the left. So the output of DREZNO should go to the input on Lipsk, which is here. I hope that you can see it. In is written in the circle there, and the little dot indicating the orientation for the cable is on the bottom. The red stripe on the cable is here where my thumb is. So the cable should go in or on like this. Connecting these cables can be really stressful. At least it was for me, because you really need to be careful connecting these in the wrong way, and turning on your system will destroy something. Perhaps not the LEIBNIZ modules, but possibly something else. So then I want to go from Lipsk to Jena. For this, we connect the output of Lipsk to the input on Jena. Again, being careful of the orientation of the cable. So the dot is on the bottom, the red stripe is as well. The input of Jena is here. The arrow is on top here. So I need to turn or twist this cable so it lines up. And that should be correct. And then the output of Jena, which is here, and the red stripe of the cable is on top. So it should go in or on like this. And this one needs to go back to DREZNO. So back to the input side of DREZNO. The dot for the LEIBNIZ input bus is here. So the cable should go on like this. And then, of course, if you had already connected the power cables, you just need to mount these inside your rack and you're done. Let me do that really quickly and demonstrate this chain. Of course, don't forget to double check if every cable is connected in the correct orientation. So let's have a look at what this chain does when we now connect just the same LFO as before, or at least something similar. Let's go through the scope and let's once again use the output of DREZNO to modulate the timbre knob of rates. But let's route the signal through the scope as well. And you'll see when we unlink the output and the input side of DREZNO, this means unlinking the DAC from the ADC. The signal that's going in comes out of the output. You should really think of them as two separate modules, and especially when we have a chain like this, it's really easier to think of them as the ADC being on this side, then there's Lipsk Jena, and then the DAC is on the end of all of this. But right now, because the link button is not pressed or not lit up, there's nothing happening because we're just sending an LFO in, and we can extract these bits that we see here. We can see the bit activity from the LEDs here. We can extract these bits as gates, and we can see some bit activity here, but it's not represented at the output. So we can extract the bits here from the input. We can extract the transformed bits here, but they're not being converted back into an analog signal by the DAC. Okay, but let's link all of these. So you can see that the triangle wave that we are sending in is transformed by Jena by using lookup tables for the bits into something else. Now we can invert some of these bits before they enter Jena, and this of course changes the bit information that Jena receives, so this will also change the wave we get from the output, because Jena doesn't receive a triangle wave anymore, because we're changing it with this. I can show you this by just unlinking Jena and doing this. So when I invert bits with Lipsk, I change the triangle wave into this. Now when I link Jena, Jena is receiving this wave instead of the triangle. So of course, if I send a triangle into Jena, it's going to sound different than when I sent this wave into Jena, which sounds like this. Now I keep saying sounds like, but we're just using this wave to modulate the rates here. But of course you can also use these waves at audio rates. That being said, when you use Jena in synchronous regime, it just syncs to the incoming waves, usually audio rate oscillations, and then it really doesn't matter what wave shape you send in, it just looks at the frequency and the phase of the incoming waves, and it just spits out whatever is in its banks, and it really functions just as a wavetable synth. At that point it would make more sense to chain Lipsk behind Jena. But now let's wire this up differently. So Lipsk is behind Jena, and let's have a really quick look at how this changes the behavior of this LFO. So I changed things up Now the LFO that we're seeing on the scope is going into the ADC input of DREZNO, then it's going into Jena, from there it's going through Lipsk, and from there it's going back to the DAC output. The DAC output is linked through the scope, and we're using that signal to modulate the timbre of rates, which we have been doing the whole time. At the moment nothing is going through. DREZNO is just converting the LFO into bits. We can extract the gates here. We can see the activity from the flashing LEDs. Jena is also converting these bits into other bits using its lookup tables, and that's about it. So if we link the DAC side of DREZNO to the ADC side, just as before, we're just getting the LFO out of there. But then if we link Jena will convert the bit information into something else. I'm using the same bank and shape as before. So when just using Jena, this is the shape. We saw this in the previous example. Now when we engage inversion of bit 6, which is actually the 7th bit, you can actually see that the LFO that we get out of the DAC is actually a little bit different than what we saw before. So it really matters in what order you chain these. It really comes to what you want to do. Now instead of unscrewing your system every time you want to rewire these modules, you could just hook up a patch bay. Now a few months ago someone from France contacted me that he wanted to send me this kind of patch bay as a really cool solution for this, and I filmed a little clip of me installing it. And what this patch bay does is it brings the LEIBNIZ connectors to the front of the case. Now there's kind of a big warning connected to this. Besides it being handmade, not professionally built or anything. These panels are aluminium and are cut with a water jet, which is kind of impressive, but it's really necessary to watch out that you don't leave any headers open or bare. As you can see, I left headers bare here, but they're not connected to anything in the back. Should I have connected them to modules here, it's really a bad idea to leave them like this. You should approach these like power connectors. I'll put some contact information in the description box of this video. This is really useful, but just take care to not fry your modules. So this will be it for this video about how to chain these modules together. Of course, when you get effort and Potsdam, or should I say Potsdam, anyone that knows how to speak Polish, please leave it in the comments how to pronounce Potsdam or Potsdam or possibly Potsdam. I really have no clue. So if you start connecting these modules to the chain, it gets more confusing, but you really should just follow the basic principle of connecting Leibniz out headers to Leibniz in headers. And if you want to be able to extract an analog signal from anything binary, you should always end up connecting the last binary output to the input on DREZNO. I will do videos about effort and Potsdam. I also want to show how Ostankino interacts with the system, and I want to do a short video how Odessa interacts with the system as well. Thanks again as well to Klodifokan for sending me this PatchBay. This is really useful. If you want to get one of these, the information is in the description box. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something. Bye!
Yeah.